Hello, everyone. We're so glad you could join us today to have this really important discussion about what's happening with AI SEO. I want to acknowledge before we get started that everyone has AI exhaustion. It's like, what now? Every day we're hearing about new platforms, new approaches, new things that we need to know. And let's face it, we're already all overwhelmed as it is, just trying to keep up with the day-to-day that we already have on our plates, and then figuring out how to navigate this AI journey together. But I think you're going to enjoy this program today because it's going to provide a practical approach that doesn't get tripped up in the approvals and guardrails and what can we use and what can't we use. And better yet, it's something you can do right now with your existing team. And it's going to create real opportunity and, more importantly, help generate revenue down the line. So we're really, really thrilled that you can be here with us today. We're going to take questions at the end, so please make good use of that Q&A and let us know what's on your minds, and we'll tackle those when we get through the program. So with that, Mark, let's get started.
All right.
So for those of you who may not know me, my name is Amy Shepard. I'm a former AmLaw CMBDO. Over the course of the last year, I focused my efforts on immersing myself in AI and building the AI advisory practice at Gladstone Growth Strategies. And I'm really excited to partner with my friends at Directive Group to have this discussion today. Mark, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Mark Bowens. I am a content and SEO specialist. I've been at Directive Group doing this work for the last, I want to say 13 or 14 years. I've been a digital marketer for close to 20 years, and I'm really excited to talk about some AI today.
Hi, my name is Lisa Meyer. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the CEO of Directive Group and working with Mark for quite some time and Amy for a bit of time. And I'll be the moderator. I'll be watching for your questions and I'll take those at the end. Thank you for joining us.
Terrific. So let's talk about what's happening. Obviously, we're all very familiar with Google searching and all of the efforts that all of us have gone through to optimize our firms from an SEO perspective. And a lot of that groundwork is still the same. What's happening, though, is AI is introducing a new element that we haven't seen before that requires us to think differently about how we're optimizing our content and our sites so that we can be positioned as experts in this new age of AI. And so we're all familiar. You go to a Google page, you type in a question, you type in a topic, and then you get your search engine result page. But now what's happening is you're seeing an AI generated overview at the top. And that presumes if people are still using Google. I know myself, I'm not turning to Google when I'm looking for something. I'm using various AI platforms to find information. And we know that client behavior is following the same trend. So we want to focus on is how can we adapt and still be relevant from a traditional SEO perspective, right? Which is good hygiene and structure and paying attention to keywords that matter. But instead, shifting our thinking to think about this more broadly from a topical standpoint, and that what is really driving searching today are the questions that clients are asking. Next slide. So what is AI really looking for? So what it's looking for is topical clarity. And topical clarity isn't, I published one legal alert or one white paper, I was quoted in one newspaper article about a topic. What it's looking for is a system of content that all points to the same topic, where you can see that there are different approaches to dealing with a certain topic or answering certain questions. When they're looking for source credibility, it's not enough to simply have the content on your website. What you're looking for is that it links out and it links in. So that includes posting on social media, that includes linking to sites where you may have been interviewed or we have some earned media. It could be that you are linking to other sources that are also authoritative on the topic and creating a view that shows that you are in the mix, not just a single voice, but you are in the mix of a community of people talking about a topic. And then, of course, the structure of that content and how you answer those questions. This is really the critical point that we really need to think about. For years, we've always had, this approach where, I've watched brilliant communication teams members and business developers kind of have that push-pull with their lawyers who are generating this really terrific, rich content. But it is written like a lawyer for lawyers, as opposed to, necessarily for more general business audience. And so sometimes we win, sometimes they win. Most of the time we meet in the middle and have some kind of amalgamation that includes some of the terms of art and the legal jargon, and maybe kind of soften it down with a more business-minded tone. But how you answer those questions is going to be really relevant, and not just in the content that you're producing externally, but also in the schema and the way your site is structured on the back end. And Mark's going to talk about that in a little bit. Next slide. So to deal with some of that push-pull, right? I know what it's like to walk into, a very successful lawyer and try to convince them to do something differently. They've already established themselves as an authority. They have a great practice. They have a high level of expertise. They know what they're doing. And let's face it, we've all been there. Everyone thinks they can do marketing. We might not be able to do their jobs, but everybody thinks that they can do ours. And so wanted to create something where you would have a tool that you could use to evaluate your existing content, to see how well it's going to have this performance with this new set of criteria that we're looking for, and also what you can use to move your thought leaders down this road to thinking more about how they are handling their content and how they are saying what they want to say, not in a legalese, look at me, I'm the expert, highbrow approach, but taking a more client-centric view and thinking about, am I answering the questions that my clients are asking about this topic? Because that's how they're going to interact with AI. They're not going to go in with a broad-based topic. They're going to ask, what is the implication of this regulation? What is the impact for this industry and this area of my business as a result of this decision? And so authority is about, what do you have? So the AIM framework has three components: authority, intent, and meaning. Authority is about having that content cluster, having a system of information that is all related to the same questions or the same set of questions. Like you see when you do an AI search now, you ask it a question and it will prompt you with other related questions related to the same topic. That's how we have to be thinking, not just the high level question number one, but what are the follow-on questions that are related to this topic, and how can our content serve as a source to answer those questions? And that's where intent comes in. Intent is measuring how well you're answering the questions that are being asked. You could have a really great take on a topic that is on its face sound, might even be interesting. But if it's not framed in a way that is designed to answer those questions, your content is not going to perform as well in the AI engines. And then finally is meaning. Can AI interpret the structure of your content in a defined way? And that's where that schema comes in. And so it's not just about how you're structuring the questions and the content on the front end, but it also requires you to think differently. And this isn't just about tagging content, right? We all use our CMS systems to tag content to make sure it's related to the right areas. It's a little bit more involved in that. And so that is an additional step that you need to take while you're working on the front end content with your communications team and your writers. The web team and the people and the tech people on your teams who are managing the site, they need to be aware of how to structure this content for success as we move forward. Next slide. So my own experience, I've been through a number of website builds and also website refreshes. And so there's certain content that we kind of consider somewhat evergreen, right? Practice area pages are a perfect example. We're updating content. We have laterals join, a new group, we open a new office, we do a merger. So we're going to massage that content to reflect the new reality. We may add some representative matters here and there, and we're always linking related content, right? A legal alert or an award or a press release. But this is different. We need to think about those practice area pages in a different way. I'm not suggesting you need to rewrite all your content. I'm not suggesting you need to generate 10 tons of new content. This is about taking your existing content and looking at it through a different lens. And so while it's important, your legal alerts and your white papers and other things may be the content that's answering those questions that we talked about that are on the client's minds. But it's really important that for those practice areas that you really feel create competitive advantage for your firm, that you are embedding some of those questions and that responsiveness to those issues in the content on those pages. And I think it's also important to note that I'm not suggesting this approach for every practice area at your firm. My prior life, I worked for a number of full service firms that had, 40, 50, 60, 70 practice areas. Throw on another 20 or 30 industry groups, initiatives. We are not suggesting that you point this arrow at all of that content. but you know the areas of differentiation within your firm. And those are the areas you should be thinking about when you're thinking about applying the AIM framework and when you're thinking about optimizing from an AI SEO perspective. You know, disconnected content, I see this happen all the time. We want to kind of share the love, right? We want to, you know, it's hard to get a writing rhythm going. And so we're quick to bring in multiple different authors. You take this one, you take that one. That is not an optimal approach for this type of work. For this type of work, you want to have a consistent group of authors, a consistent thought pattern around the content so it works together. You may have a legal alert or a white paper, maybe an FAQ or a checklist, and making sure that those questions that you're answering are peppered throughout and that the system works together, again, as a cluster or a pillar. And Mark's going to talk about that in a minute. And the final piece I'll say is we spend an inordinate amount of time in these website projects looking at how the site looks, because let's face it, we want to, you know, have an experience, you know, that is focused on the user. We want the sites to be beautiful. We want them to feel new and updated and refreshed. And all of that is important. UX is still supremely important. However, the emphasis now has to be on the quality of your content. So I would, you know, trade maybe some of those more optimal, you know, or long tail discussions around how the sliders work, or, you know, how the content is structured and what it visually looks like, and pay a little bit more attention to how I'm going to create competitive advantage with this content that we are spending so much time and energy producing on a daily basis. Next slide. So Mark, you want to take us through this idea of clusters and pillars?
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, structuring our content, because if your content isn't clearly organized in a way that helps AI understand who you are and what you know, your firm is not likely to really show up in the AI generated results. And that's even if you have good content, even if it's well structured and written accurately. And so, you know, that may not seem like a big issue today, but 6, 12, 18 months from now, as user behavior continues to change and to shift into AI, what you are like to see is your firm should start to see a drop in traffic and leads, you know, from these traditional channels that we depend on today. So instead of just losing those opportunities, you know, what we want to make sure is that those prospective clients still find your firm, but they're just finding your firm through AI channels instead. And so, you know, what does this mean to structure your expertise? And so when I think about structure, I'm thinking about two things. So the first thing is how your content is categorized, and Amy talked a little bit about um, thematically, right? And so I'm thinking about the meaning. Is your content grouped around clear and thematic topics? The second thing that I'm looking at is how your content is connected. And for that, I'm really thinking about literally how your pages are linked together. And I think this is where firms sometimes can fall short, because it's the combination of the categorization and the connection that helps AI to understand your expertise and helps you build the topical authority. So, you know, another way to kind of think about this and how we're trying to get all of these content pieces to connect together is that you don't want a bunch of scattered stars, right? Random blogs and alerts and pages kind of floating around your website. What you want is you want a constellation. You want a connected pattern that clearly shows, you know, what your areas of expertise are, and that way the AI systems or the large language models that the chatbots like ChatGPT and Perplexity depend on are able to recognize and summarize your content, and then, you know, use your content as a cited source. And so the strategy that we use to build this kind of structure is called a content cluster. And we sent out some information and some content around this pre-webinar about it. And it's really, you know, it's a simple but effective way to show how both search engines and AI systems are able to kind of to view you as an expert. And so content clusters really only have a couple of pieces and things that you're looking at. Number one is the pillar page, and the pillar page is just the core page that dives. I'm sorry, the pillar page is just the page that focuses on the big picture topic. And then the second piece is going to be just the supporting content. We might also refer to that as cluster content. And so those pages are going to be the pages that dive into the related subtopics, answering questions, solving client problems. And so let me just, we have this diagram here. Let me just see if I can make this a little bit bigger so we can take a look at this. And so really with this diagram, what I'm trying to just show is how everything connects back to the pillar. And admittedly, this is a kind of a simple diagram, but let me just kind of walk you through this really quickly. So obviously we have the pillar page here in the middle, and then we're just showing different types of content. These first 5 bubbles here are different type of content that you may or may not have on your website. We're not saying these are the only 5 pieces of content, but you have FAQs, legal alerts, practice guides, attorney commentaries. All of these different types of content are or should be linking back to your pillar page. Another thing to take note is obviously you may have multiple of each of these types of content. So you may have, an FAQ page, you may be doing question-based articles, and you may have 10 of those, or you may have 15 case studies. All of these thematically that are relevant should be linking back to your pillar page. The other thing that we have here, and Amy talked a little bit about the practice area page, is we also would want to have our practice area page linking back to the pillar page as well, and the pillar page linking back to the practice area page. And we'll have an example around immigration, corporate immigration strategy. And so if the pillar page is about corporate immigration strategy, this practice area page would be your immigration service page, and so that would be linking to the pillar page. Lastly, what we're just trying to show with this last pinkish red bubble here are just that external other websites. So you may have profiles on other websites, you may have content, social media. These things that are relevant, again, we're also trying to link those back to your pillar page as well. And so,
Mark, can I interrupt you 1 second? When we
Sure.
were talking the other day, we were doing a presentation about this, and the issue came up of microsites. And so you answered actually I had 2 questions. My first question was, pillar page is different than a practice area page, but you've already covered that. But we were asked the question, are we suggesting that you should build all these microsites? And I think that, when people think about kind of an extension of this content, oftentimes that's an approach. Can you address, the microsite approach and why that's different than what you're describing here?
Yeah, so generally, we wouldn't recommend the microsite approach, or I think they refer to them sometimes as satellite approaches. And so these are generally new websites that you would build up outside of your website. And we're definitely not recommending that. One of the main reasons is that it dilutes, the authority that you have. We're trying to build up as much authority as we can, and then connect other platforms or other platforms and information back to your website to show your topical authority. The other thing is that if you have multiple sites, right, like you have to write content for those, you have to have resources for that. And so, it's you're creating more work for yourself in most cases. And so in most cases, we would recommend against that, and just say to focus on your own website and your existing content, and find a way to repurpose and use that content on your website. And that's kind of what we're addressing on the next slide, is that you may already be doing some of this, or you may be saying, I'm already doing some of this. And so let's talk a little bit about what you might be doing, and what AI optimized look like, because what we're talking about are some nuances here that make a difference when it comes to AI. And so, as I'm going through this, you can kind of think about your site, and what it looks like, and you may be on the AI optimized side, or you may have some work to do. But so the first thing that we're looking at, and like I said, Amy was just mentioning, were the practice area pages. And generally, what we see is that the practice area pages, they describe your services, and they're focused on you, the firm. And what we're recommending on the AI optimized side is you still may have that practice area page on your site, but you're linking to a pillar page, and a pillar page is client focused, right? So the traditional practice area page is firm focused. The pillar page is client focused, answering questions, helping them to solve problems. Uh, your page traditionally might be more promotional because you're promoting your capabilities and your services and your attorneys. Um, on the AI optimized side, the pillar page is educational, right? And so these are, there can be similar pages, but the intent is a little bit different, right? And so, moving down, you may say, well, I have a ton of content already. I have all these alerts. I have all these blog posts. But again, the it's not just the content that you have; it's how everything links together, right? And so we want to make sure that that supporting content is intentionally linked, strategically linked to your pillar page, and you're trying to build that topical depth. And so, this next one, the content organized by format. This isn't something that we see on every law firm site, but Amy and I were kind of discussing this. This is something that we see enough that we wanted to put it on here. And because sometimes what happens is that you'll just organize your content solely by the type of content. So, if you're doing webinars, blogs, and you have your alerts, your guides, you have all of that information, but that's the only way that it's organized. And it is user friendly to have that type of filter on your content, but we would recommend that your content is grouped by topic, and then if you want to have a secondary filter that is organized by content, that's fine to do it that way. And so, moving down, we've been talking about structure, um, like how we're linking the content together. Right now, what we're zooming in when I'm talking about long, you may have long text-heavy pages with multiple topics. I'm zooming into the actual structure of a page. So I'm zooming into the layout that is on a particular page, right? So this may be the actual pillar page, or maybe be one of your supporting articles that we're talking about. We're looking at the actual, piece of content. And what an AI optimized page looks like is it's scannable and it's focused on the subtopic. So when I'm talking about scannability, I'm thinking about, again, the layout of the page. I'm thinking about the subheadings that you're using on the page. I'm thinking about smaller, shorter paragraphs. I'm thinking about the spacing, the white space on the page. I'm thinking about visuals, pictures, images, tables. All of these different things help to chunk up your content in a way that AI can parse that information and kind of bring that information out and summarize that information. So we want to make sure that everything is kind of chunked nicely so that AI can pull that information.
Mark,
And
can I ask you a quick question?
sure.
I know that a lot of sites, there's a lot to say, particularly if you have a large firm, you're trying to cover a lot of ground. So oftentimes, we'll utilize read more buttons or accordions, just to kind of save the scroll, right? So that way you can kind of see more of the presentation. Is that still effective? Can you still leverage accordions and read more and be successful in this approach? Or, is it really, you're talking about a lot shorter content, but let's face it, the lawyers have a lot they want to say about themselves. And sometimes, we have different, ability to advise them successfully that we need to shorten this up. So can you talk about the impact of accordions and read mores?
Yeah, so, and let me just clarify a point. And so it's not necessarily that the content, um, like the word count on the page would be, so much shorter. But what you would be doing is chunking that information up in a way that is more easily readable. So it just wouldn't be like one long block of text. When I say shorter paragraphs, I'm almost thinking more like like I am thinking like a marketer. I'm thinking like a copywriter, right? I'm thinking about, just shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences that are easier to read, right? So I'm thinking about readability. As far as, um, using some of these tools that can kind of help shorten the content. I think the read more is a little bit different because you're clicking and you're linking off to a different page. But accordions and other kind of visual things, they still have the content. Crawlers can read that content. I believe AI can still see that content, and so it's okay to use some of those things, and those can act as some of the visual elements and things that we're talking about.
And when you talk about chunking the content, when you have those subheaders, I mean, I see it, a lot of, firms do that, but the subheaders, to your point, what you mentioned before, were kind of about them. That's your opportunity to have subheaders that are, describing the kinds of issues that clients are thinking about or the questions that they have. Is that right?
Yeah, and so definitely, again, we're thinking about client intent, questions, answering direct questions. That is, something, and I'll show that on the next slide. But that is, we're thinking about having compelling, almost like titles and chapters in a book, right? We're thinking about compelling lines and headings that are going to bring people in to read what we're talking about. So, moving along to the last point here, and so, I think by now probably everyone on this call is doing SEO. You have optimized meta descriptions and titles and things like that, and you may even have some more advanced things like schema on your website, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But you have these SEO elements on your website, and all of those things still apply. You still want to have those things as it pertains to AI optimization. But one of the more important tools that we use is schema, structured data or schema markup to give AI and even search crawlers more explicit context. And so let me just back up a little bit and kind of explain what schema is. And so schema is just code that goes on your website, with the HTML and the JavaScript on the back end of the website. It's not something that you're going to, or your visitors are going to visually see on the front end of your website. But what it does is it provides additional information about the content on the page. And so the way that we use schema, like I said, it still applies how we use it for SEO, but we're a little bit more strategical with it when it comes to AI optimized. And so just kind of to give you a simple example, and Google's search results are changing all of the time. So this is not really common anymore. But what you may used to see when you did a search result is you may see like a star rating for an organization, a firm, an attorney, and that's usually the result of schema that was created or a markup for the rating, a ratings schema to let the crawler know that, hey, we pulled in some information, we have some additional information about ratings, and we would use that type of information or that type of code to increase the visibility in search results, right? Like if you go to a Google search and you see a an attorney or an organization that has 4 out of 5 stars, and then you see another uh, attorney and there's no stars, it's just a regular link, you're probably going to click on the one with stars first, right? And so traditionally we use some of these elements to increase the visibility in search. That's still important, but really with AI, what we're doing is we're trying to use schema to create that constellation that I was talking about, right? And so we'll use schema to identify the organization, the firm, or the attorney, what information they know, and more importantly, what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect all the other information that is off the site. So those profiles, the other content, interviews that may have been done, mentions or people talking about you on other websites. We're using that schema markup to connect those dots and to tell AI that, hey, I really am a trusted resource that you can use.
Hey, Mark, a question came in on
Sure.
what you're talking about now, the pillar pages. And
Yes.
the request is, can you describe a pillar page in terms of a law firm website?
Yes, I can do that.
That's
And let's,
perfect, Mark. It's
let's
like they
let's
knew what the slides were. That's great. Thank
let's
you for that question in the
let's
audience.
Thank
let's
you.
let's get into an example right now, right? And so this is an example of a full content cluster. And remember, the content cluster includes the pillar page, and then it also includes supporting content. And so this is an example for a corporate immigration strategy. And this blue, let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger here. So let me walk you through this. So the blue is the pillar page. This is the page that is, about the main topic. And so corporate immigration strategy, managing talent, risk, and compliance in global hiring. So that all the information that is on that page is kind of a broad overview page, but it's going to also be linking out to other pieces of content. And so what you see for the gray uh, circles here, these are other pieces of content. Now, this is a very specific type of content. We're focused here on these question-based articles, but you see, what is required for I-9 compliance in 2025. This is a separate, again, question-based article that would be linked to and from the pillar page, right? And so, when you're looking at this, one of the things that we're paying attention to, all of these little blue lines here are linking to the content, and then the gray lines are the content linking back to the pillar page. But again, we have, how should we prepare for a surprise ICE worksite visit? How long does the H-1B sponsorship process take? And so these are questions. This is the client focus. This is the client intent. And so this is what a content cluster, these two combined make the full content cluster. So we have this pillar page, this overview page, and we also have these supporting pieces of content. Now, this example is admittedly very kind of simple. It's kind of an oversimplification, and that was done on purpose. So one of the things that this diagram here that does not show is, if you mentioned on that first diagram that I showed you, we talked about the practice area page linking to the pillar page. So in this case, your immigration page would, your traditional immigration page would link to this corporate immigration strategy page. And so you would have a link on that page to this page. And then again, this page would just be sharing overview content for this corporate immigration strategy, and all of the surrounding content is going to go deeper into those topics. They're going to expand, they're going to answer specific questions. So that's one thing to take note of. The other thing is that the questions that I have here, so I did focus on question-based content. And one of the reasons I focused on that is because that aligns how people search and how AI systems retrieve and surface information, right? Like when you sit down to use a chat GPT, you're usually asking it a question, right? Like, or when you see those AI overviews pop up in Google, it's usually the result of you asking a question. And so I'm highlighting, of course, this is not the only type of content that you would create, but I'm highlighting these question-based articles, FAQ, because this is, you may have, a lot of alerts, and you may have kind of narrative-based blogs, thought leadership content, attorney commentary. But what you may not have are just simple articles that are answering questions. And so one of the things that I also want to just make sure that I'm clear on is that with these question-based style articles, we're not saying that they should be thin, kind of 100-word articles. You want to answer the question, but there's still an opportunity to provide more comprehensive insights, more practical guidance, more information. There may be questions that they don't know to ask, right? And so that are aligned with what this subtopic is. And so you want to make sure to provide all of that additional information in there, and you still want to, we like to say that you want to answer the question directly, but you also want to answer it, comprehensively. And
Mark, can
so,
I ask a couple
sure.
of questions? Just a few, just to contextualize this a little bit. So I just want to reinforce the content pillar is not necessarily the practice page. So as you mentioned, corporate
separate page.
immigration, even if you're a firm that only does corporate immigration, you would kind of have an immigration overview of your practice, and then it's going to link out to this content pillar. And then you're going to have these other spokes. But, and also, I guess you don't necessarily have to have a published legal alert or an article or a white paper that answers these questions. What you need are pages that answer these questions that then can link to legal alerts and blogs and podcasts and articles that you may be quoted in. That's how you're building out this ecosystem, right? And
Yes.
then the last question I have is that we are not suggesting now that every law firm website, that every section of the site should be like a question and answer, right? The idea
Correct.
here
Yeah, yeah.
is to, you know, weave this in where it makes sense, right? Where you have the depth and where you have the content already existing, or you have a real specialization where you can go deep. Those are the pages that, you know, again, those should not necessarily be structured as Q&As, but the idea is that you're changing the lens of how you think about what you're creating from a content perspective with these client questions in mind. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, with the pillar page, first, let me say, you know, we're kind of talking about a general broad overview page, you know, that is kind of acting as a resource, you know, almost like you know, an airport or a like a bus
Like a
route, right?
resource
That's
center.
connecting, like a resource center that's
Resource center,
connecting
yeah.
all of these pieces. But there are different types of pillar pages, right? If you were starting your you know, your website completely from scratch, yes, there is a way that you could make your practice area page more like a pillar page, right? Like that is possible if you were doing a complete restructure, but that's not what we're, you know, kind of talking about or recommending here. You already have that page, and we're talking about using the resources you have, and you know, you already have content, right? And so with this kind of strategy and what we're recommending is, right, you're only really kind of creating one page and you're using resources that you already have. You know, you're updating that and you're staying um, you know, you're staying up to date with that information. And you know, as it pertains to the type of content, when you're talking about the questions, we're absolutely not recommending that you only have questions. We're just highlighting it because it's a type of content that is often absent. Any of these um, content pieces here could be case studies. They could be again, alerts and other content that you have, thought leadership pieces that are relevant, all linking back to the strategy page. I have a couple of examples here at the bottom, like this corporate immigration risk checklist. That would be its own bubble. It would be linking to the pillar page, and the pillar page would be linking back to that page. And so, Amy, I know that you wanted to mention, you know, we talked about a lot of this. I know you want to boil this down, you know, into some execution and kind of what are some of the next steps here.
Terrific. Yeah, we want to get to the practical stuff. Okay, so what now, right? We've shared with you kind of the approach, and we've set the table. So we want to, you know, give you some actionable things you can take away. So here's an example of a kind of a 90-day roadmap as you kind of think about, you know, how you want to start to apply this to your firm. So obviously understanding, you know, where you are comprehensively from an AI SEO perspective. Great place to start is with an audit from our friends at Directive Group. And they can show you, and particularly with that focus on schema, right? I can say that I was involved in several web projects. We didn't focus on schema. We focused on meta tagging and content organization and things like that, but we didn't spend a lot of time talking about schema. So I think that's the real eye opener and the real opportunity. And then think about these 1 to 3, you know, high priority topics. You know, you know what your firm is really great at. You know where you have real depth. You know where you have an interested audience who wants to be known and seen as authoritative. Focus on those. Don't try to do 15 or 20. Start small, be focused, and then look at the existing content you have that goes with those topics. And then you want to start thinking about those topics in a different way, not necessarily from what we want them to know, but what the questions that they're asking. And then we're going to look at those core practice pages and use the AIM framework to evaluate authority, intent, and meaning, right? And that's the combination of the, you know, creative communications, copywriting side, and then the technical application of the schema and the structure to make sure that this content is surfaced when AI is looking for it. And then now we've got a blueprint. We've got our first cluster. We've developed the pillar and the spokes. And now we're ready to kind of put it out there and see how it performs. Now, I want to acknowledge that it is early going. As fast as AI is moving, certain areas are lagging. And I think AI ROI is still, kind of a bit of a hazy area. There are tools out there that are being developed that allow you to track your AI visibility, similar to what we've been able to do with, Google keywords and search rankings. And we'll keep you up to date as those tools are refined. There's no one authoritative, definitive source to get that information today. But you can definitely start to look for engagement signals, right? If you start to see increased attendance at your programming, if you start to see increased engagement from clients, if lawyers are reporting to you, a lot of it, look, let's face it, as marketers and business development professionals, we're pressed constantly for ROI. Some of it's easy to get to, a lot of it isn't. We've got a lot of metrics, and some of them make sense to the lawyers and some of them don't. But a lot of it is anecdotal. So talking with you, constant communication, being in the loop with the lawyers who are connected to your content pillar is a great way to start, and then start monitoring and see the trends that you're developing. Next slide. Internal buy-in is key. And again, you have my empathy. I know what it's like to take really successful lawyers who have done just fine doing it the way they've always done it, and get them to try something different. They also don't like to be guinea pigs. They want to invest in tried and true things that they know are going to perform and deliver. And we know that the future is this. The future is now. This is where we're moving. And so the first movers that start to think about their content in this way, and that can get the interested lawyers and say, let's show the way here. You've invested all of your time building your expertise and your authority in the traditional way. Let's not waste that momentum, and let's take what we already have, because I think that's the critical piece. I know all the teams are strapped. You've got more work than you can ever get done. You're outsourcing where you can, and you're repurposing people when the fires pop up. So the goal here is not to go out and create reams and reams of new content. The goal is not to go out and create, busy work for lots of people. Take what you already have, and it's about using that in a smarter way and repositioning it so that it works in the future of AI SEO. Look for those engaged lawyers who are interested in this. We all know who they are, who love to see their names in lights, who want to be noted as the authority. You know who they are. I know who they are. So that's your focal point. And here, as you're thinking about how to draft kind of this repurposed content, right? Leverage generative AI to the extent that your firm allows, to give them first drafts to shoot at. We all know the lawyers are much more responsive when they're firing away at something someone else created versus, starting with a blank page themselves. And then again, start to track the engagement and the visibility. Look for signals. Your data. All of us are using, CRM systems and other tools to track engagement and visibility. Look for peaks and valleys. Look for changes in the approach. And then as these new tools come out that help you allow to, you to track your AI visibility, you'll be already poised with the traditional data and then be able to add that on. Next slide. So what would I do now? I would get with my business development professionals and my content teams, the communications team, your copywriters, your press and PR folks, and let's start talking about what are the BD teams hearing when they're talking with the lawyers. When you're attending practice group meetings and they're giving examples of new matters or new cases, what were the key client questions that were being answered? So it really creates a whole different way to have those conversations. Talk to your lawyers about what are if clients are calling you, what are they calling and asking about specifically, not generally, what question are they asking? Excuse me. And then look at that and then start to build your plan. Create, additional content off of existing high performing content that performed in the old way, FAQs, checklists, things you should know, things that are actionable, that feel responsive to those key questions that your lawyers are saying that their clients are asking. If you've got a client feedback program, you should absolutely be asking your clients how they're using AI to answer questions and what types of questions are they answering or they asking. That will give you great insight into this client-centric approach where you're really putting the mind of the client first. We've been telling lawyers to do that for a really long time, but this is a really great moment where the world and the systems that are being used to generate information are finally aligning with the good advice we've been giving all along. And then, of course, there are experts to help. The directive group, as I mentioned, their SEO audit is terrific. And it provides a good roadmap of where the pain points and opportunities are. And of course, I've developed the AIM framework and a readiness assessment to give you a roadmap to how you can have these conversations within your firm, how you can evaluate your existing content so you don't waste a lot of time focusing on the wrong things. Next slide. And so now Lisa is going to take us through the Q&A with the questions that you've submitted. Thank you so much. I've seen them come in fast and furious in the Q&A box here. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Amy. I will ask a technical question first. There's really two questions here, Mark. The first question is, what specific schema markup is most important for law firms? And then another question came in asking about the importance of semantic HTML.
Okay. Yeah. So as far as the schema, all the types of schema that we are using traditionally, and so I'll give you a couple different ones. There's organization schema, there's person schema, there is article schema, FAQ schema. All of those kind of traditional schemas are important. We want to, there's properties for each of those schema. We want to make sure that we're using those as well. And then another type of schema, and the one that really kind of helps to connect all of the pieces together, is called same as schema. And so really what that is that's really linking your firm to all these trusted external sources. And so again, that's kind of helping building your knowledge graph, or that, again, I keep going back to the constellation. And as far as I believe, what was the second question, Lisa?
It was about semantic HTML.
And I'm sorry, what was the question? Is how important is it?
Yes, in this new world. Yes.
Yes, I'm not sure, like, as far as, obviously semantics is important, but I'm not, all of this semantically is critical for AI to understand what your site is about. And so I can't speak to this, unfortunately, I'm not, a programmer coder, but I can't speak to the specifics on semantic HTML and its relationship. But I can tell you that we're not focused just on like keywords and that semantic relationship, and understanding the different pieces and components and how they relate to each other is critical for AI, and that is a critical piece to what AI is trying to do.
I think at the end of the day, Mark, right? I mean, AI, it comes out of natural language processing, right? And the idea that, computers spoke binary code, right? They had ways and systems of talking to each other. And now you have an interface that is intended to replicate and understand and predict, right? Predictive, AI, that what the next word is that you're going to say, right? We see it every day when we're writing emails and things, right? It's trying to tell me what I want to say and filling in the words for me. And so I think you're right. I think the big moment here is around the fact that, we tend to focus on high level language, right? We want to seem sophisticated when, the reality is most of us in our lives, regardless of how sophisticated and polished we are on the outside, when we're behind closed doors, we're asking very plain, basic. I mean, some of us are the same inside and outside, but, myself included sometimes. But, I think that the goal here is that at every turn, it's really to think about the most practical approach. What language can I use that is going to encapsulate and speak in and be recognized as part of that natural language processing and predictive nature of anticipating, what it is that people are trying to get at, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Amy a question for you. I'm not 100% certain that I heard exactly the answer, but how do we prioritize which practice areas to focus on first?
Sure. I mean, I think the important thing is look for those practice areas where you have depth, number one. You have willing participants. This is not something I would do where I'm dragging people to the chapel, right? I would want to have people that are already in the mix. They've got a good beat of and some sort of rhythm with content creation. If it's a differentiator for your firm. So for example, when I was at Ballard's Bar, the CFPB practice, right? The consumer finance practice, that was a differentiator. Our First Amendment litigation practice, a differentiator. Our trial practice, a differentiator. Look for practices that you really have the depth and the content to support creating this topical authority. So when you're and that's part of what the readiness assessment, the AIM ready and the framework is for, to help you suss that out, right? So first, do I have any true differentiators for my firm from a practice perspective? Do I have an invested group of folks who are already generating this content? Usually it's a mix of partners, associates, sometimes paralegals, staff attorneys who are helping. Do I already have that system in place? Okay, great. Do I have different modes of content, right? Is this just a legal alert machine? Do we have a blog? Are we doing podcasts? Do we have a lot of earned media where we're out there, getting quoted and getting interviews and being cited as experts in other publications? Okay, do we have a chambers right? Okay, now I'm starting to build the picture of true authority. And then for the team, we take a step back and we look at, all right, let's evaluate the content we have. Let's kind of compare it to this framework and let's look at that intent. What questions are we answering without necessarily explicitly calling out the questions? And let's start to repurpose that content in a different way so that it's more, question driven. Chances are you have what you need to work with. It's about having that discussion and the strategy behind where you focus. This should not be accept all comers. And as I said, if it's a generalized, labor and employment practice, we do everything. They produce tons and tons of content because there's always some issue in the news, whether coming out of COVID or non-competes going away or, what's happening now connected to immigration, all of these things. That's great. But it may not be a differentiator. And chances are everybody's talking about those same topics. Because let's face it, when there's a triggering event, we're all racing to get the news out, right? Supreme Court decision comes out. We want to be top of the box, hoping that we're going to get our clients' attention, even though we know every firm they've ever known is sending them the same content about the same topic. So I would focus on where you have the niche, where you have an invested group of content producers, and where you have a good mix of content to start with. And that's where I would point my arrows to start this process. And then as time goes on, also, I would be looking to see what are the emergent areas, right? What are the emergent areas that are bubbling up that are going to take center stage in the next 6 to 12 months? To the extent that you're hearing that from their lawyers, what are they following? What are the implications of the geopolitical or economic environment? What is on the docket for the next set of Supreme Court decisions? And start to build that pillar now, if you believe it's an area of expertise for your firm.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. I'm going to ask a little bit of a follow-up question that seems related. When changes are being made, focus on certain areas, build the pillar page in the content clusters, how would a firm go about measuring ROI on these content architectural changes?
So, from my perspective, and I'll let the technical experts weigh in as well, but I think, look, when we create these sites, these beautiful sites that we spend bajillion dollars on that take months and months to do, we're looking to keep people around, right? We're looking for site sessions, how long the durations are. Are they moving? How many pages did they visit, right? What you're creating now is a journey for them centered around, specific questions that we know are top of mind for clients. So until there are good AI visibility tools out there where we can kind of put in our information and see what it serves up, you should also be searching about your firms. If you've got an area that you believe your firm is the differentiator and the top of the heap, Chambers Band 1, preeminent practice, you should be checking social, going onto these sites, generative AI, go into Perplexity, go to ChatGPT, go to Gemini, go to Grok, and ask questions related to that practice and see if you're served up as the experts. Now, that's a good place to start. Mm-hmm. And then as you start to see and start to make these changes, I would be looking for longer site sessions. I would be looking for stickiness where they're visiting more than one page. And where they're navigating in a different way. And then eventually the industry, very quickly, at this point, it'll be tomorrow, but a new tool will be out there, or a suite of tools, or everyone will have a tool where you will be able to track your visibility. There has been talk about, we didn't get into it today, I think we could have a whole nother discussion about what the potential of paid AI search results looks like. And I do believe that, let's face it, if there's a way to monetize something, it's coming, you know? So I think that is going to be a factor further down the road, but you can be ahead of this. It's kind of like, you know, being one of the first set of firms to build a website back in the, you know, 90s, where, you know, not every law firm had a website that had, you know, 1,000 pages. So that's what I would do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add to that to monitor, you know, some of your existing platforms. I talked about um, how we may see, you know, a shift in some of the traditional channels like organic traffic, and we may see some of that to start to shift. So I would say while we don't have all of these kind of AI tools to easily track the AI presence, and a lot of it is manual, and you're looking to see how you, if you show up in AI overviews and you know, kind of interacting with a chat bot. I will say that also monitor, you know, some of the things that you're probably already monitoring. So your organic traffic, is your organic traffic decreasing as a result of these AI search results or AI search um, bots, and is your referral traffic, you know, so like traffic from places like ChatGPT or Perplexity, are you seeing that traffic increase? And so those are a couple of other things that you can take a look at.
And, you know, just to add to that, I think that in terms of measurement on the website itself, conversions in the form of form completions or phone calls can be tracked, and a lot of firms you know, have gone through the analysis to identify the value of each form completion or each phone call, and that would be a way to begin measuring, because you can see where it's coming in from. So um, we have a very short amount of time. I think one, maybe two more questions, and then Amy, you'll probably want to wrap up. Around traditional SEO, two questions. One came in about, first of all, do we see any differences in how USA sites in the United States approach this AI as compared to European or Asian markets? Is there meaningful information out there yet about the difference between AI by market, by geography, if we have any information about that? And then I'm going to pair that with this other question that came in, which is the approach we're talking about. Will that help with traditional SEO as well?
Yeah, so to answer the second question first, absolutely, right. And so it really kind of depends on where your site or your how your site is already optimized, right? Because if your site is at at a, let's say a white belt SEO level, right, and you make some of these changes, and your 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 content isn't structured in a way that is helpful, you're going to see a dramatic shifts and changes in your you know, in your like organic traffic right now, even with some of the things that are shifting, because you're not kind of doing some of those pieces now. If your site is already at the top of the line, right, black belt SEO to say, right, like you're probably already doing a lot of these things. You're probably using schema in that way, or close to that way. You're definitely clustering up your content in that way. And so it how much it impacts depends on what your, you know, what your current state of your website is. But um, when we think about Google AI overviews, is that's on top of Google search, right? So when you're talking about that, all of the traditional SEO metrics and things that we are thinking about are going to apply to that. And then the AI stuff is on top of it, right? It's a little bit different than when you're talking about like a chat GPT that's using, you know, the large language model, which is the technology that is, you know, built behind those chatbots, right? They're not indexing your content like a crawler is. It's a little bit different. So yes, um, um, yes for that, and then I haven't seen any data like for a difference as far as, you know, like across. I haven't really researched that, but I would imagine that it's, you know, pretty much the same if you're in another, you know, country. I don't maybe if the search patterns may be different, like the actual user behavior of how and how many people are using these different AI bots. I do know that I believe it was a consumer survey that I saw recently for the United States that was showing that 1/3 of people in the United States have used a chatbot in the last, I think it was 3 months or 90 days, something like that, right? And so that may be very different in Europe, or maybe more or less people. And so you may see these shifts happen differently. But I think as far as the technology, I think that would be that would be pretty similar, you know, regardless of where you are in the world.
The one thing I'll add to that, I know we're at time. I just want, obviously, Europe has led both the GDPR and the privacy conversation, and now they're at the forefront with the EU AI Act and kind of figuring out what the guardrails are. So obviously, as different rules and regulations are adopted that are going to impact how these models function outside of the US, we may see adjustments that need to be made for sites that are, based outside, or that sites that are going to cross those lines. But I agree with Mark. I don't think that I've seen anything specific to the build yet, but I think that obviously as these laws and these regulations play out, it may impact how we have to do things on the back end of the site, as it results to how those models are permitted to perform and the guardrails that have to be included for their safe use in Europe and abroad. So with that, we are at time. So if we could just put up the final slide. Thank you for joining us. For those of you that stuck in till the end here, I'm grateful. It's been such a terrific journey to do this with my friends here at Directive Group. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Reach out to Lisa as the point person on the AI SEO audit. You can reach out to me at Gladstone Growth Strategies about the AIM readiness assessment. And for those lucky first 10 registrants, we'll be reaching out to you directly to set up your free edition of both. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope this was informative. Please reach out and connect with us. I'd love to hear your feedback on LinkedIn and through email. And we look forward to bringing you more topics around this soon. Thank you very much for joining.